YouTube Bronx, hope you guys have been enjoying your journey through Honkai Star Rail. With the game's launch, the most popular questions that I've been getting on my Twitch stream are, who's good with blank? How do I build around blank? What's the best team for blank? In this video, we're going to cover essential team building tips for all general content, and an overview of all the current characters' general team synergies. So the general structure of Star Rail's team building revolves around two crucial pillars. First, we have type coverage for weakness breaks, and then second, we have character paths for team DPS and survivability. For type coverage, the system is visually similar to Pokemon's type system, similar to how there's a super effective, neutral, and not very effective damage modifier in Pokemon. In Star Rail, enemies have a weakness bar with types that are essentially, quote, super effective against them. If you press Z in-game or look at them before the match starts, you can notice that sometimes they have a type resistance and also a crowd control resistance. Any other types that are not included in the weakness bar or in the resistance tab are considered neutral. So in the early game, which I consider below Trailblaze level 40, your teams want to cover as many types as possible because the enemies that you are fighting early can vary quite a lot in different weaknesses. As you only have 4 slots on your team, we ideally want 4 unique types for maximum coverage. With 7 total types currently in the game, 4 gives you a pretty solid chance at decent enemy coverage no matter what you face. Now, as you progress further and further with farming relics, clearing simulated universe 5 and 6 repeatedly, or progressing through Forgotten Hall, you'll need to start focusing on enemies' type weaknesses. So instead of trying to cover all bases with 4 different types, we can loosen the restriction and double down on identical types for more consistent weakness breaks. This makes logical progression sense. As you get stronger, you fine-tune your teams and have specialized backup units to tackle specific content that is weak to certain types. Now, once you are so brutally strong that you don't need to worry about weakness breaks, for example, you're a Giga Whale and swipe for max Eidolons and superimpose light cones, or you're a veteran F2P that's been playing for multiple years, then there's a possibility of not needing specific types to tackle content. This is essentially brute force, like using one level 100 Pokemon and one-shotting everything to grind EXP and EVs for your lower level ones. Currently, I think most players are in the early stages and transitioning to farming for upgrades where they can level up specialized units to fine-tune teams against specific content. Second pillar is character paths. Now, we currently have 7 in the game, and not only do they play different roles, but they are also important for positioning in your team. This is because each of the 7 paths have what can be referred to as a hidden taunt level, which means they are more likely to be attacked. We also have character abilities and light cones that affect this trait and effectively create tank units. For the 7 paths, we have 4 levels of taunt. Since currently we don't know specific percentages on the chance, we have to generalize this with highest as 4 and lowest as 1. Preservation has the highest taunt level of 4. They are also typically the tankiest units with higher defense than attack and great bulk HP. Their abilities, light cones, and relic possibilities usually enable them to mitigate damage and tank more. Destruction has a high taunt level of 3. These are your bruiser characters, which typically have a balanced build between high HP and high attack to provide good DPS and good bulk. Their abilities, light cones, and relics usually enable them to be bulkier in HP and attack, heal a portion of HP off of damage dealt, or convert lost HP into more damage. Harmony, Nihility, and Abundance. These have a low taunt level of 2. They're your supports and your healer, which typically have balanced stats. Their abilities, light cones, and relics usually improve their utility for the team in terms of healing strength for Abundance, more buffs for Harmony, more effective debuffs on enemies for Nihility, or increased damage corresponding to debuffs for Nihility. Hunt and Erudition have the lowest taunt level of 1. These are your primary DPS units, which typically have higher base attack and base speed at the cost of fragile defenses. Their abilities, light cones, and relics are glass cannon focused, providing raw DPS increases usually in the form of attack, crit rate, or crit damage. So with this in mind, we can position our characters in the 4 slots. Your tankiest unit, which is most often your preservation or destruction oriented character, goes on one of the edges of your team. So it's either left or right. Doesn't matter which side, just choose one. I typically like to go left because this allows me to fill out from tank to DPS, but that's just me. So while this doesn't matter for single target enemy hits, AoE enemy hits sometimes have side collateral damage, so having your tank on either the left or the right edge removes one side of the collateral, reducing the overall damage that your team takes. Depending on which edge you decide to orient your tank, the rest of your team goes in descending order of taunt level. So as an example, if you have preservation and destruction on the left, you'll have your supports and healer in the middle, and then your hunt erudition on the right side. To further min-max positioning, characters with the same same taunt level can be ordered with the highest effect resist near the tank to reduce the chance of debuff, or the more offensive route, you can put characters that you want more energy generation on after being hit closer to the tank. Be careful with the second option though, as you don't want to accidentally knock out one of your less tanky units because you wanted more energy. But what if you are not running preservation or destruction characters? Then the only two taunt levels your team has is low of 2 and the lowest of level 1. In this case, all you can really do is place your Hunter or Erudition characters with the lowest one hugging one edge. This reduces the chances they get hit by a grouped attack to just throw next to their neighbor instead of being in the middle between two. So that's an overview of the team building structure in Honkai Star Rail. And while there are exceptions to these tips, looking at you March 7th, they hold true for a majority of the game. With 22 current characters in the game, including the Trailblazer, let's go through specific synergies. In the preservation path, we currently have 3 characters, with 2 being Ice type and a Trailblazer's Fire type. The 4-star, March 7th, is actually a unique preservation character, with a skill that provides a shield with increased taunt level. So, while she herself is preservation and has high taunt level, she can redirect taunt to another ally with her shield or shield herself to draw all enemy attacks. We'll talk about this a little bit more when we cover Clara from Destruction. Gepard and Foul Trailblazer are both pretty standard tank characters. Gepard has an AoE shield on his ultimate, a free revive upon taking lethal damage from his passive, and also freeze utility on his skill, independent of the ice weakness Break Freeze. Fire Trailblazer has an actual taunt effect on their skill, which is different than each path's hidden taunt level, and produces a visual debuff that can be inflicted onto enemies. Probably the closest true tank we have, Fire Trailblazer combines a true taunt, self and team damage reduction on skill after trace upgrading, excellent fire type coverage with AoE fire on ultimate, and enhanced basic attack. Playing around these preservation characters is pretty intuitive, so make sure to place them as close to one side as possible. In the destruction path, we currently have 4 characters, with 2 physical, including the not shown Trailblazer, 1 fire, and 1 lightning. Clara is the most unique destruction, with a taunt and counter type of playstyle. A combination of Clara and March 7th is extremely potent, with March 7th's shield and increased taunt adding to Clara's self-taunt and counter abilities, forcing enemies to always attack Clara, and for Clara's Svarog to always counter, assuming she's not under crowd control. In more difficult content that has physical weakness, a tried and true method is abusing Clara plus March 7th plus Natasha, with both March 7th and Natasha's Cleanse Ascension trace upgraded to provide infinite sustain to Clara while she counters the entire battlefield to death. Hook and Arlen are bruiser DPSs, with Hook dealing consistent damage through high multipliers and burn damage over time, while Arlen is a berserker DPS. He sacrifices HP to deal increased damage. Both of these destruction characters have lifesteal HP sustain on their first ascension trace for synergistic survivability from their offense. Physical Trailblazer's agenda is dealing as much physical damage in a short time as possible. No innate sustain, but has high multipliers and trace upgrades to deal more damage and higher ultimate uptime. Playing around destruction characters involves catering to the character's specific strengths. Clara really wants March 7th with shield, taunt, and cleanse. Hook synergizes best with nihility debuffs and damage over time buffs. Arlen wants shields, not necessarily taunts, and damage over time removal to maintain low HP levels for maximum damage. As destruction characters are mostly offensive, the best value is gained when enemies have their corresponding type weakness. In the abundance path, we currently have 2 healers, physical Natasha and lightning Bailu. Abundance characters in general are standalone units. Their character type matters much less since they usually will only be able to weakness break with their basic attack, so it's okay to double up on your healer's character type if you need that. These are currently the most valuable characters to have, since damage is inevitable in a turn-based game, and thankfully, Natasha is provided for free through story progression for all players. In my opinion, it is absolutely essential to upgrade Natasha's Ascension Trace for skill cleanse as early as possible, and with this added bonus, she becomes a universal staple in basically all meta or non-meta teams. Bailu is also an excellent healer, and while she doesn't have a cleanse in her kit, her healing potency is staggeringly high and also has a free revive once per battle with her talent. So with current content, I'd always recommend saving 1 slot in your team for an abundance character, unless you are extremely confident with only relying on shield and tank from the preservation path. In the harmony and nihility path, we have 6 characters total that cover a wide range of types. I've covered the basics of them in a previous video, and in general, these characters are the specialized backbone of your team that occupy the middle 2 slots. Harmony characters are less reliant on character type, and are primarily chosen for direct synergy with your other characters. Bronya and Ting Yun are heavily offensive, focused on increased turn order, attack, damage percent, crit buffs, and higher ultimate uptime. Asta is an excellent specialized fire boss weakness breaker, allows your team loop potential with their ultimate's increased speed. Nihility characters are almost like a 2-in-1. They are mainly used for their potent debuffs and type coverage for incredibly consistent weakness breaks. They can also serve a dual role as your DPS with high multipliers, relics, and offensive Nihility light cones. Wealth is currently the one-for-all Nihility debuffer. He has insane imaginary type coverage, he has imprisonment and movement speed reduction, and he also has naturally high damage output courtesy of his talent. Sampo, or Shampoo as I like to call him. He is a wind weakness destroyer, similar in effectiveness as Asta, but he also applies a bunch of damage over time with his talent, and he's a mischievous mastermind in general. Pella is your ice weakness destroyer. She also has a buff remover on her skill and also has defense break on both her ultimate and her technique. Of these three, Pella and Welt do not have any specific synergies. They are standalone debuffers that work primarily with Hunt Erudition characters to improve their DPS. In my opinion, I classify Shampoo as more of a DPS and a debuffer, honestly, focused on maximizing damage over time damage against all enemies in a long duration fight, rather than trying to impair or assist your allies in dealing more damage. His greatest asset is on single target bosses, where his skill shreds the enemy weakness bar just like Asta's skill. Now, choosing to run your Nihility as a DPS can remove the need for a strict Hunt/Erudition character in your team, and allow another team slot for more Nihility or other supportive defensive characters. If you decide to do that, damage output might be overall lower, but crowd control is overall going to be higher. In the Hunt and Erudition paths, we currently have 8 characters total of all different character types. Fundamentally, all the Hunt characters operate the same. They have relatively high speed, have extremely potent single target damage, and really effective weakness breaking for their specific type. The exception to this is Xlice's passive Resurgence, which allows her to act again upon killing an enemy, turning her into a pseudo AoE character. Erudition characters also mostly operate the same. Himiko and Serval are AoE and damage over time characters in the form of burn and shock. Herta is a follow-up focus damage, and Qingque is RNG AoE quantum damage. Kind of, for lack of better description. If you really like Lotto, Gamba, and Gacha, then Qingque might be up your alley depending on your playstyle. So my personal preference is pairing your Hunt/Erudition DPS with at least one Harmony or Nihility character, alongside one Abundance, and then leave the last slot for Flex. Flex can be Preservation for a true tank plus DPS oriented team comp, or you can double up on Harmony Nihility for 2 supports, 1 healer and 1 DPS, or you can run a second Hunt or Erudition for more DPS and a generally squishier team. From my experience, pairing Hunt/Erudition with the destruction paths have no inherent synergy. It's mostly done for straightforward type coverage and raw DPS. And that should be a pretty comprehensive overview of structured team building in Honkai Star Rail. In my opinion, the most universal unit that everyone should be investing in is Natasha, since she has the only heal plus cleanse skill in the game currently. This leaves the remaining 3 slots to be balanced with tank plus DPS, defensive or reactive like Clara, or offensive and glass cannon. Let me know in the comments what team you like to run. And if you learned something, don't forget to like and sub to support the channel. Thanks as always for watching, and we'll see you next time. Take care.